That Friday night was the most intense and memorable night of my life. I was a single mother, divorced for 8 years. I had a good relationship with my ex-husband. We just separated. I raised my son Daniel, who was everything to me. He was smart, funny, and kind, but being his parent was hard. I was so tired that night that I barely had the energy to put on my pajamas before going to bed. The house was silent. Daniel had gone to bed. I had a moment to myself. In my room, the moon shone through the thin curtains, casting soft shadows on the wall. I snuggled under the blanket and enjoyed the warmth and let my mind wander. Life had been quiet lately. Daniel and I had been through a lot together. We had built a wonderful life together since his father left. Even though Daniel was almost 20 years old now, we were still close. He had always been a caring and thoughtful person. Sometimes I worried that he had too much responsibility for someone his age. I felt lucky to have him in my life. I fantasized about the time I had with him. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a soft knock on the door. I thought it was part of a dream, but the knock came softly again. I was wide awake. "Mom," Daniel's voice was calm, but it was enough to wake me up. I blinked and tried to focus on the door. I could see Daniel's outline in the dim light. I sat up and tried to wake myself up completely. "Daniel, what's wrong?" I asked. My voice was still sleepy. He paused before walking into the room and closing the door. He seemed unsure whether to come in. I can't sleep," he said, standing by my bed with his head down. I felt worried because I could tell that he was worried. Since the divorce, Daniel sometimes couldn't sleep, but he rarely talked about it. I could see the sadness in his eyes. "Hurt, come here," I whispered, patting the empty spot next to me on the bed. "You can stay with me tonight if you want." He hesitated for a moment, then came over and laid down beside me. He turned sideways towards me, and I could see how tired he looked in the dim light. He also looked vulnerable. "Do you want to talk?" I asked gently. Daniel shook his head, his black hair hanging over his eyes. "No, I just want to be close to you." Since Daniel wants to be close to me like this, it's like when he was young. I reached out and brushed his hair off his forehead, smiling at him. "It's okay," I whispered, putting my hands on his shoulders. "You can stay as long as you want," he smiled back. But I could still tell he was worried. Something he didn't want to talk about. I didn't ask him about it. Instead, I laid down. Put the blanket over us. Let the silence soothe us. We lay there for a while, enjoying the silence. Daniel's breathing slowed. I thought he was asleep. But then, he spoke again. I could barely hear him. "Mom, have you ever thought about him?" His question surprised me. But I knew he was talking about his father. It was a question I had avoided for years. When I didn't know how to answer, I would sometimes quietly admit it. But things weren't going well between us. "Daniel, you know." He nodded, but I could tell he wanted to know more. "Have you ever thought things could have been different?" he asked. I sighed, thinking of the regrets of the past. Maybe. But we can't change what has happened. We have to move on. I hugged him tight. He resisted for a second. But he hugged me back, buried his face in my shoulder. "Daniel, listen to me," I said, my voice shaking. "Your dad made his own choice. This has nothing to do with you. This was his decision. This was never your responsibility. You were always more than enough for me. Daniel," I whispered, my voice full of love and comfort. "You are my everything." He nodded against my shoulder. but I could still feel the tension in his heart. The weight of years of unspoken pain and guilt. We held each other tightly. The silence between us grew into a balm of comfort. His body relaxed. His breathing was rapid as he drifted off to sleep, but as he fell asleep peacefully beside me, my mind raced. Thoughts and memories swirled in the darkness. We had both endured too much. Yet, in the quiet comfort of our shared embrace, an unexpected feeling stirred within me. A feeling I could not name. It was a warmth, spreading through my chest. A connection that felt deeper. More intimate than the usual connection. Between a mother and her son. I tried to dismiss it, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing. But the feeling persisted. A persistent whisper that refused to be ignored. Morning came all too early. The soft light of dawn painted the room in soft hues. Daniel slept soundly beside me. His face was calm and relaxed. The tension of the previous night seemed forgotten. I watched him for a moment. My heart swelled with love and pride. Yet the unfamiliar feeling lingered. Soon, Daniel woke from his sleep. His hair was brushed with a towel. His lanky frame still bore the marks of puberty. Yet, there was a new maturity in his eyes. A hint of the man he was becoming. I greeted him with a warm smile. Try to mask the nights waving with the emotion lingering, he quickly came over and fell into my arms. I felt the unfamiliar warmth rising in me again, a mixture of relief and an undeniable sense of connection. The bond between us, once defined by the roles of mother and son, seemed to shift and evolve into something new, something neither of us fully understood, but both felt instinctively. Now I held him tightly, letting the moment pass without question, without explanation. I was unsure where this newfound closeness would lead us, but I knew that life as we knew it was changing, surrounded by the warm embrace of my son. A profound realization washed over me. The delicate balance of our relationship had shifted, the way he sought comfort in my arms, beyond the boundaries of traditional mother and son. If I was honest with myself, I felt it too, a warmth that spread through me as I held him, beyond the maternal instinct. Comfort. I put the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. He's just a kid. I reminded myself. Your son. But the feeling lingered, the persistent whispers that refused to be silenced. He finally broke the silence. There was gratitude in his voice. Thank you for last night. Mom. I needed that. His vulnerability surprised me. You never have to thank me. Daniel. I reassured him. I'll always be there for you. No matter what. He nodded, his eyes wandering. His transformation from boy to young man. Our most intimate moment the night before. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my feelings for him go beyond the boundaries of maternal love. That night after dinner, we sat on the couch and watched a movie. The room was dimly lit. The flickering images on the screen casted dancing shadows on the wall. We were mostly silent in each other's presence. But as the movie progressed, I was acutely aware of his approach. His arm brushed through my arm. With every subtle shift, my heartbeat quickened. I tried to focus on the movie, but the tension between us was palpable. A silent symphony. Halfway through the movie, Daniel moved his arm closer to press against mine. This time, he didn't move away. His warm skin against mine, making me aware of it. I glanced at him and our eyes met. His eyes were filled with newfound power. Reflecting the emotions I'd been trying to suppress all day. Unconsciously, I reached out and took his hand. Our fingers intertwined. He didn't resist. Instead, he gently held my hand. His thumb traced a slow circle across my skin. This simple gesture sent a surge of emotions through me. A new feeling that was both familiar and exhilarating. We sat like that for a while. Hands clasped in the dim light. A silent testament to the transformation. We were close, the dynamic of the relationship. It was a turning point. A moment of speechlessness, understanding. Beyond the boundaries of our familiar roles. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew things were changing. Daniel was no longer just my son. He was more than a person I cared about in a way that I couldn't define. The movie was over. But we were still on the couch. The credits rolled without me noticing. I rested my head on his shoulder. Feeling steady. The rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. It was a small gesture. But it felt incredibly intimate. A silent acknowledgement of the connection. Blooming between us. Mom. Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm really glad you came. His words were simple and profound. Echoing the emotions in my own heart. I'm glad he's here, too. Delighted at this unexpected closeness. This newfound intimacy was both terrifying. Exhilarating. As I lay in the dark. Encircled by my son's warm embrace. A profound realization washed over me. The delicate balance of our relationship had shifted. Teetering on the precipice of the new. And the unknown. I felt a wave of fear. Whispers of uncertainty. What this shift would mean for us. An undeniable sense of anticipation. A recognition. This was only the beginning of the journey. He grasped my hand. His touch conveyed warmth. Spreading through me like wildfire. I smiled. Gently holding his hand. We sat there. Fingers intertwined. Bathed in the soft glow of starlight. It was a love that could not be defined. A connection. That transcended the boundaries of familial roles. In that moment. Under the vast night sky. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead. We would face them together. As time went on. The intimacy between us deepened. Woven into the fabric of our daily lives. We didn't need to give it a label to define it. It just was. It was the way our eyes met. In the lingering touch. In the quiet moments we shared. Creating a world that was just ours. With each passing day. Our connection grew stronger and stronger. More tangible. My initial feeling that the conflict was resolved. Was replaced by a sense of righteousness. A feeling that this was where I was meant to be. Daniel was no longer just my son. He was my partner, my confidant, my lover. Our relationship was blossoming beautifully. Filling needs. We didn't even know we had. Until one rainy afternoon in late fall. The full realization of our love washed over me. The sky was stormy, a grey canvas of raindrops hitting the windows in a steady rhythm. Daniel and I curled up on the living room couch. The fire crackled pleasantly in the fireplace, casting a warm glow in the room. We were wrapped in blankets. The warmth of the fire and our closeness. The closeness created a haven from the storm outside. Daniel leaned against me. His head rested on my shoulder. I absent-mindedly ran my fingers through his hair, enjoying the quiet intimacy of the moment. The rain streaked through the windows, blurring the outside world. Creating a sense of seclusion. In our own little universe. I could feel his slow, steady breathing. I knew without saying a word that he was in love with our relationship. I felt the same way too. The same. An undeniable pull to something deeper. He looked up. His eyes met mine. In that moment, the truth of our love resonated between us. It was more than love. It was something beyond the traditional roles we played. A connection that had evolved into something deeper, something undeniable. "Mom," he whispered, his voice full of action. I stayed silent and waited for him to continue, knowing that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "I love you," he confessed. He reached out and took my hand. "Not just because you're my mom, but because of who you are. Everything about you. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I couldn't help it." His words washed over me like a warm wave, filling the room with love and making my heart ache. In the most beautiful way. I felt what he felt. But hearing his voice, acknowledging the depth of his feelings, made it all more real. I squeezed his hand, feeling the stability, the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my fingertips. "Daniel," I whispered with a slight tremor in my voice. "I love you too. I've always loved you deeply. But this is different." He nodded, looking for comfort in me, for the answer to an unspoken question hanging between us. "I don't know what it means," I continue, "but I know I feel the same way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Feeling right." A gentle smile touched his lips. My heart was filled with more joy than ever before. "I'm glad you think so," he whispered, "because I don't know what I would do if you didn't." I reached out and touched his cheek, feeling his warm skin beneath my fingertips. "We'll figure it out," I reassured him. Together, we sat in silence for a while, our eyes locked. The only sound. The soft sound of rain and the crackle of fire. Words were unnecessary. We said what needed to be said. We both knew how we felt. We both knew it was true. It was undeniable. Slowly, Daniel leaned in. His eyes never left mine, tenderly, hesitantly. He kissed me. It was a soft, tender kiss, with all the love and desire we had been holding back for so long. No urgency, no rush. Just a pure expression of our deep affection. When he pulled back, his eyes were full of emotion. I knew we had crossed a threshold of no return. But instead of fear, I felt a sense of peace. This was where we were meant to be. He pulled me close, his arms wrapped around me. We held each other as the rain continued to fall. The fire cast a warm glow over our embrace. In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The rest of the evening was a blur of tender touches, soft conversations and gentle kisses. We didn't discuss the future, or the meaning of our new love. All that mattered was the present, the shared intimacy of that moment. As the rain continued its gentle serenade, I marveled at how quickly our relationship had transformed. Daniel had grown from a boy to a man. And in doing so, our relationship had blossomed into something unexpected. Something beautiful. Something that was perfectly suited to us. That night, Daniel came to my room again. But this time, there was no hesitation. He climbing into bed next to me, his arms wrapped around me, holding me tight. This wasn't the comforting embrace of a mother and son. This was the embrace of equal lovers. Two souls intertwined. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. A symphony of love and contentment. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. A wholeness I didn't know I was missing. Whatever this was, whatever it had become, I was ready for it. Daniel and I had always been close. But now we were something more. Something that defied. We were partners. Lovers. Two souls bound together. Because of love, beyond the boundaries of the norm.